You being the attractive woman on that show, are you allowed to go outside your apartment, or is it dangerous? Are they just...
We don't have apartments.
You know...
In the early 2000s, she was the undisputed breakout star of one of television's biggest sci-fi franchises. Millions watched her every week. Magazine covers plastered her face across newsstands worldwide, and she possessed the kind of instant fame most actors spend a lifetime chasing. Then, almost as quickly as she arrived, she pulled back from the Hollywood machine and vanished from the spotlight. So what actually happened to Jolene Blalock, the actress who played Subcommander T'Pol? The Vulcan phenomenon. When Star Trek Enterprise premiered in September 2001, the entire weight of a billion-dollar sci-fi legacy rested on the shoulders of its cast. Set a full century before Captain Kirk ever stepped onto the bridge of the original Enterprise, the series aimed to show humanity's messy, awkward first steps into deep space. But among the human crew of test pilots, engineers, and wide-eyed explorers, the show required an anchor, a presence, to embody the strict logic, stoicism, and quiet superiority of Vulcan culture. Enter Jolene Blalock as Subcommander T'Pol. Stepping into a Vulcan role isn't just taking a job, it's entering a minefield of fan expectations. Ever since Leonard Nimoy defined the archetype as Spock in 1966, the Vulcans had been the emotional and intellectual spine of the entire franchise. Audiences knew every nuance, the eyebrow raises, the hands held in the iconic salute, the deliberate suppressing of every internal storm behind a wall of cold, unyielding logic. To miscalculate that performance meant immediate rejection by one of the most passionate fan bases on the planet. Yet from the moment Blalock appeared on screen, she didn't just meet the bar, she grabbed the entire series by the collar. Playing a Vulcan requires a deceptively difficult balance. If you play it completely flat, the character becomes a wooden, boring piece of exposition delivery. If you show too much emotion, you break the fundamental rules of the lore. Blalock mastered the delicate space right in the middle. She gave T'Pol a tightly coiled, underlying tension, a sense that behind her flat vocal cadence and icy stare was a mind constantly working to evaluate, endure, and quietly tolerate the chaotic humans around her. As the first officer serving alongside Captain Jonathan Archer, played by Scott Bakula, T'Pol quickly evolved into the true emotional core of the series. While Archer represented human ambition and raw impulse, T'Pol was the voice of cold reality. The friction between her Vulcan detachment and the crew's emotional instinct didn't just drive the weekly plots. It gave the prequel its actual purpose. Viewers weren't just watching Starfleet explore the galaxy. They were watching the historic, difficult bridge being built between two entirely different civilizations. The response from sci-fi fans and industry critics was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Blalock became the breakout star of the network, earning widespread acclaim for bringing depth, dignity, and unexpected warmth to a character explicitly designed not to show any. Her performance earned her the Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actress on television, alongside the Cinescape Genre Face of the Future Award. In the eyes of millions of viewers tuning in every week, T'Pol wasn't just another crew member on the ship, she was the undisputed reason to watch. However, being the undeniable star of a major network drama in the early 2000s came with a very specific, aggressive promotional playbook. Network executives at UPN were desperate to drive ratings among younger demographics, and they leaned heavily into marketing Blalock's physical appearance. Almost overnight, the serious dramatic actress found herself thrust into the hypersexualized media blender of the era. She was splashed across the covers of high-profile men's magazines like FHM, Maxim, and Stuff, quickly landing on international Hot 100 lists and being framed by the media primarily as a global sex symbol. This push extended directly onto the screen, leading to some of the most debated and polarizing design choices in modern Star Trek history. Unlike the standard fleet uniforms worn by her human crewmates, T'Pol was outfitted in a series of custom skin-tight catsuits that highlighted her former modeling background. Even more notorious were the show's infamous decontamination chamber scenes. In these sequences, crew members returning from alien planets were required to strip down to minimal clothing, enter a blue-lit room, and rub glowing antibacterial gel over each other's bare skin to prevent space infections. While framed in the narrative as standard Starfleet medical protocol, the camera angles, soft lighting, and lingering shots left zero doubt about their real purpose: bringing unabashed, provocative eye candy to primetime network television. Later seasons doubled down on these dynamics, introducing storylines involving nerve pressure massages and forced physical intimacy that pushed the boundaries of standard sci-fi storytelling. Behind the scenes, Blalock found herself navigating a tricky, frustrating tightrope. While she remained fiercely dedicated to her craft and loved the narrative potential of her character, she was never afraid to express her discomfort with cheap titillation. In interviews during and after the show's run, she candidly criticized the studio's tendency to prioritize provocative outfits and forced romance over genuine character development. She argued that T'Pol's strength lay in her intelligence, her stoic loyalty, and her complex inner conflict, not in how tightly her suit fit or how often she was written into a shower scene. Despite the studio's heavy-handed marketing tactics, Blalock's talent ensured that T'Pol transcended the eye candy trope. Over the course of 4 seasons, she delivered a rich, compelling character arc that tackled Vulcan addiction, deep cultural prejudice, grief, and the quiet agony of suppressed emotion. She took material that easily could have devolved into a hollow studio caricature and transformed it into a memorable, legendary figure in the Star Trek canon. By the time the show reached its 4th season, Blalock was firmly established as sci-fi royalty, a beloved, talented actress holding down one of the biggest brands in pop culture entertainment. So, where do you go when the cameras finally stop rolling on sci-fi's biggest stage? Where is she now? When Star Trek Enterprise was abruptly cancelled by UPN in the spring of 2005, it didn't just mark the end of a 4-season run, it signaled the closing of an entire 18-year continuous chapter of televised Star Trek. For Jolene Blalock, the cancellation brought a complex mix of relief, frustration, and sudden freedom. While many actors exiting a major franchise immediately throw themselves into the brutal machine of pilot season to secure their next steady television paycheck, Blalock chose a completely different path. She didn't chase the system. She looked at Hollywood's rules and decided she no longer needed to play by them. To understand her immediate retreat from the spotlight, you have to look at how the series ended and the outspoken stance she took during its final days. Blalock was never an actor who gave canned, studio-approved soundbites. As a lifelong fan of original Star Trek lore, she cared deeply about the narrative integrity of the show and was fiercely protective of T'Pol's growth. When the series finale, titled "These Are the Voyages," was delivered to the cast, Blalock was appalled. The episode notoriously sidelined the Enterprise cast in their own series finale, framing the entire story as a historical holodeck simulation being viewed years later by Star Trek The Next Generation characters, Commander Riker and Counselor Troi. To make matters worse, the script abruptly killed off major characters and unceremoniously flattened 4 years of relationship development between T'Pol and Trip Tucker. Blalock didn't hide her anger behind publicists. In press interviews while promoting the final episodes, she publicly labeled the finale appalling and insulting to both the cast and the dedicated fanbase who had invested 4 years into the story. She openly criticized executive producers Rick Berman and Brannon Braga for delivering a finale that functioned as a rushed wrap-up for the broader studio brand rather than a meaningful farewell to the Enterprise crew. In an industry where actors are expected to quietly smile and thank studio executives regardless of script quality, her raw honesty was revolutionary, and in traditional studio circles, it was viewed as a risky move. Once the set was struck and the costumes were archived, Blalock stepped away from the traditional Hollywood hustle. She made a conscious decision not to spend her life pounding the pavement for roles that reduced her to the same narrow, sexualized archetypes she had spent 4 years navigating. She didn't hire aggressive PR teams to keep her name in tabloid columns, nor did she pursue fame for its own sake. Equally surprising to fans was her deliberate absence from the lucrative Star Trek convention circuit. For most franchise alumni, fan conventions represent a guaranteed, highly profitable revenue stream and a permanent ego boost for decades after a show ends. Yet Blalock virtually disappeared from public fan gatherings after 2005. The reasons behind this retreat were twofold. First, her experiences with the studio's intense sexualized marketing during the show's run, combined with uncomfortable boundary-crossing interactions with toxic corners of early fandom, had left a sour taste regarding public franchise appearances. Second, and perhaps most importantly, her personal life had transformed entirely. In 2003, during the height of Enterprise, she had married music executive Michael Rapino, who would soon become the CEO of Live Nation Entertainment. With complete financial security and a growing family, Blalock had no economic need to sit at convention tables signing autographs for hours on end. As the years rolled on, her absence created an aura of mystery around her name. Co-stars and fans alike wondered where the fiery, talented actress had gone. Former castmates like John Billingsley occasionally noted in interviews that while they remained fond of her, she had effectively transitioned into a completely private sphere, living entirely outside the traditional Hollywood social orbit. Today, Jolene Blalock exists in a space that very few former primetime television stars ever achieve: total autonomy. She is not a tragic story of an actor discarded by an unforgiving industry, nor is she a forgotten figure wandering in obscurity. She is someone who conquered one of the biggest franchises in entertainment history, spoke her mind without fear of institutional backlash, and then willingly walked off the field because she had built a vast, fulfilling life outside of it. She didn't get pushed out of the spotlight, she simply controlled the dimmer switch. Did she drop acting altogether? Or did she just start taking roles on her own terms? The credit roll. While public perception often framed Jolene Blalock as having completely dropped out of acting after Star Trek, Enterprise ended in 2005. Her actual filmography tells a much more nuanced story. She didn't retire overnight. Instead, she selectively pivoted toward specific television guest spots, independent feature films, and genre projects that allowed her to experiment with new characters without requiring years-long contractual commitments. On the television side, sci-fi audiences immediately welcomed her into another major universe. She made a memorable 2-episode appearance on Stargate SG-1 as Ishta, the fierce leader of a group of female Jaffa warriors who fought for their freedom from Goa'uld oppression. Playing Ishta allowed Blalock to tap into heavy physical action and raw leadership dynamics, proving that her appeal in genre television extended far beyond the stoic confines of Vulcan logic. She also stepped into high-profile broadcast television guest roles. In CSI Miami, she took on a dramatic turn in the episode Bombshell, and on House MD, she played Lexa in the Season 6 episode Teamwork. Expanding into fantasy, she took on a recurring villainous arc in Legend of the Seeker as Sister Nikki, a powerful dark sorceress whose cold calculation made her an immediate fan favorite. One of her most interesting and self-aware television appearances came in the 2009 comedy series 10 Items or Less. In an episode titled Star Trek, she played a parodied, exaggerated version of herself attending a sci-fi fan convention. The meta-performance demonstrated a sharp sense of humor about her own pop culture image, proving she could lampoon the very industry ecosystem that had surrounded her for years. In feature films, Blalock leaned into darker thrillers and direct-to-video cult action projects. She co-starred in the 2005 neo-noir thriller Slow Burn alongside Ray Liotta, playing Nora Timmer in a tangled story of corruption and hidden motives. She followed that with the 2007 horror thriller Shadow Puppets. In 2008, she embraced military sci-fi by starring as Captain Lola Beck in Starship Troopers 3, Marauder. Leading a group of stranded survivors across a harsh alien wasteland, her character anchored the film's action, earning appreciation from cult sci-fi fans who loved seeing her back in a space captain's uniform. She later appeared in the gritty action film Sinners and Saints, 2010, the drama One Kind Day, 2011, and made a cameo in the studio comedy Sex Tape, 2014. In 2024, Blalock surprised the franchise fanbase by making an unexpected return to the Star Trek universe. She provided the voice for an alternate universe version of T'Pol in an episode of the animated comedy series Star Trek Lower Decks, credited mononymously as Jolene. The cameo was widely celebrated by longtime fans who saw it as a full-circle moment for an actress who had spent nearly 2 decades keeping her distance from the franchise. To understand why walking away from Hollywood was so easy, you have to look at what was happening behind the scenes, beyond the bridge, to fully appreciate why Jolene Blalock was able to step away from the relentless churn of pilot auditions, studio politics, and red carpet networking. You have to look at the remarkable life she quietly built away from the camera. In an industry where an actor's identity is often completely wrapped up in their next gig, Blalock established a personal foundation so solid, grounded, and financially independent that Hollywood ceased to be a place of necessity. For her, acting was a choice, not a survival strategy. The turning point in her personal life arrived during the peak of her Star Trek fame. While filming the 2nd season of Enterprise in Los Angeles, she met Michael Rapino, a Canadian music executive who was living in England at the time, managing international operations for major concert promotion companies. The geographic distance and demanding schedules meant their courtship wasn't typical, but the connection was immediate. In a move that showcased the same bold, decisive energy she brought to her on-screen roles, Blalock didn't wait around for traditional Hollywood romance tropes. During a vacation in Negril, Jamaica, in April 2003, she took matters into her own hands and proposed to Rapino. Just days later, surrounded by family, they were married on the beach. As Blalock's time on Enterprise wound down in 2005, Rapino's corporate trajectory was skyrocketing. He was named the Chief Executive Officer of Live Nation Entertainment, leading its rise into the world's largest live entertainment and ticketing empire. Almost overnight, the couple transitioned into one of the most powerful and influential duos in global entertainment. But unlike typical Hollywood power couples who live under the glaring lens of paparazzi cameras and reality shows, Blalock and Rapino maintained a fiercely guarded private life. Together, they raised 3 sons, Ryder, River, and Rexton, choosing to give their children a stable, grounded upbringing far removed from the superficial echo chamber of celebrity culture. Raising a family became Blalock's primary passion, and she approached motherhood with the same intense focus and dedication that she had brought to her classical theater training and television career. Her financial security and family life also allowed her to channel her energy toward high-impact philanthropic global initiatives. Together with her husband, she co-founded the Rapino Foundation, a a nonprofit organization focused on tackling systemic global poverty, supporting underserved communities, and empowering women and children in developing nations. Far from being just a signature on a check, Blalock became deeply invested in grassroots charitable efforts. Beyond their own foundation, she emerged as an avid, longtime supporter of the Make-A-Wish Foundation, helping fulfill the dreams of children battling critical illnesses, alongside supporting various animal welfare causes. This shift in priority explains why she felt no urge to fight for scraps in Hollywood pilot seasons. While many former TV leads find themselves trapped, taking mediocre guest spots or low-budget genre films simply to pay mortgage bills, Blalock had complete freedom. If a script didn't spark genuine excitement or fit into her family's schedule, she could simply say no without a second thought. That kind of autonomy is the ultimate luxury in show business, and Blalock exercised it with total confidence. In recent years, her relationship with her legacy and the broader Star Trek community has undergone a subtle, heartwarming evolution. Time has a way of washing away the friction of old studio feuds and network politics. Fans who once debated her casting back in 2001 now look back on T'Pol as one of the finest, most layered performances in the entire 60-year history of the franchise. The character's battle with Trillium-D addiction, her emotional bond with Commander Trip Tucker, and her fierce loyalty to Earth's crew are now recognized as the narrative high points of Enterprise. In September 2021, Blalock delighted the sci-fi world by making a surprise appearance at Paramount's official Star Trek Day celebration in Los Angeles. Walking the red carpet alongside former franchise peers, she looked radiant, relaxed, and entirely at ease with her place in sci-fi history. When she returned to voice T'Pol in Star Trek Lower Decks in 2024, it wasn't because she needed publicity or a paycheck. It was a playful, affectionate gift to the millions of fans who had cheered for her on the bridge 2 decades earlier. Her former castmates, including Scott Bakula, Dominic Keating, and John Billingsley, have consistently spoken of her with immense respect and warmth. They remember an actress who showed up to set every single day prepared, focused, and ready to elevate every scene she was given, despite the grueling hours and physical discomfort of her costume. When you look back at the trajectory of Jolene Blalock's career, her story isn't a cautionary tale about the fleeting nature of Hollywood fame or the brutal ageism of network television. Instead, it stands as a masterclass in personal sovereignty. She stepped onto sci-fi's biggest stage, delivered an iconic performance that earned her a permanent place in pop culture history, called out studio nonsense when she saw it, and then walked away to build a life rich with family, purpose, and philanthropy. In the end, Jolene Blalock didn't get lost in Hollywood. She just built a real life outside of it. Now, to understand the world Blalock walked away from, you have to look back at the colossal pressure cooker where it all began. The $100 million gamble. In the fall of 2001, the financial and cultural stakes surrounding the launch of Star Trek Enterprise were astronomical. Paramount Pictures and the struggling UPN network weren't merely premiering another fall television drama, they were placing a massive multi-million-dollar gamble on the crown jewel of modern science fiction entertainment. For 15 uninterrupted years, Star Trek had functioned as a dominant, highly profitable juggernaut across global airwaves through The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. Yet, as Voyager signed off in the spring of 2001, industry executives quietly recognized that franchise fatigue was settling in. Audiences were becoming overly familiar with sleek starships, immaculate holodecks, and easy techno-babble solutions. Showrunners Rick Berman and Brannon Braga proposed a radical, high-stakes solution. Strip away the pristine 24th century polish, reset the clock a full 100 years before Captain James T. Kirk, and launch a prequel about humanity's terrifying, uncertain first steps into deep space. The media hype preceding the show's arrival was relentless. Newsstand covers, late-night talk shows, and entertainment magazines treated the arrival of the new starship, NX-01, as an unprecedented pop culture event. When the 2-hour pilot episode, Broken Bow, finally broadcast on September 26, 2001, the public response was explosive. Over 12 million viewers tuned in, with peak ratings touching 16 million, delivering UPN its biggest premiere numbers in years, and instantly proving that the world was hungry for a new chapter of galactic exploration. At the heart of this high-stakes venture was a carefully assembled ensemble cast tasked with supporting Jolene Blalock's stoic Vulcan presence. Scott Bakula, already a beloved household name from his years starring in Quantum Leap, anchored the ship as Captain Jonathan Archer. Bakula brought a warm, relatable test pilot swagger to the big chair. Archer wasn't an infallible diplomat, sitting in a comfortable command seat. He was an impulsive, stubborn pioneer, flying by the seat of his pants and learning how to lead in an uncharted cosmos. Surrounding Archer was a cast of officers designed to feel distinctly human and approachable. Connor Trenier stepped into the boots of Chief Engineer Charles Trip Tucker III, bringing a southern, charismatic, fiercely loyal energy that instantly resonated with fans. Trenier's brilliant performance created an incredible emotional spark on set. The slow-burn, opposites-attract dynamic between Trip's emotional warmth and T'Pol's icy Vulcan composure quickly evolved from a fun contrast into the undisputed emotional heart of the entire series. The rest of the bridge crew rounded out a tight-knit, hard-working group. British actor Dominic Keating played the buttoned-up, protocol-obsessed armory officer Malcolm Reed, while Anthony Montgomery brought youthful enthusiasm to helmsman Travis Mayweather. Veteran character actor John Billingsley delivered a standout, fan-favorite performance as Dr. Phlox, an eccentric denobulan physician whose bizarre alien remedies and sunny disposition provided much-needed levity during dark-away missions. Behind the scenes, the cast formed a tight bond, leaning on each other to survive grueling 14-hour filming days and heavy makeup prosthetics. However, maintaining that initial wave of massive hype proved nearly impossible. The broader television landscape experienced a massive seismic shift. Simultaneously, UPN network executives began aggressively micromanaging the show's creative direction. Desperate to hook younger, non-sci-fi demographics, executives made polarizing decisions, most notoriously swapping traditional orchestral opening fanfares for Russell Watson's pop rock ballad Faith of the Heart, a move that alienated core franchise purists from day one. Studio suits demanded self-contained episodic plots, forced eye-candy sequences, and frequent time-slot shifts, creating friction with the writers who wanted serialized character arcs. As ratings began to slide, the set of Enterprise became a stressful battleground where artistic ambition clashed daily with corporate panic, testing the endurance of everyone on board. While T'Pol commanded the spotlight, she wasn't the only woman breaking boundaries in humanity's uncharted frontier. Women of the NX-01 and The Long Road to Redemption. Beyond Jolene Blalock's electric, anchor-level performance as Subcommander T'Pol, Star Trek Enterprise brought another vital, groundbreaking female presence to the early frontier of human spaceflight. Ensign Hoshi Sato, portrayed by Korean-American actress Linda Park. Park was just 23 years old when she was cast as the brilliant young xenolinguist tasked with the impossible job of translating uncatalogued alien languages on the fly, an essential role in an era decades before dependable universal translators existed. Unlike the stoic, battle-tested Starfleet officers who usually populated franchise bridges, Hoshi brought a raw, relatable vulnerability to the crew. She was openly terrified of space travel, claustrophobic, and deeply anxious about the lethal, unpredictable hazards of deep space. Park delivered a grounded, remarkably human performance, capturing a brilliant academic constantly pushing past her own fear to keep her shipmates alive. Behind the scenes, however, Park faced creative constraints similar to those that frustrated Blalock. As one of only 2 female main cast members in a heavily male-dominated ensemble, Hoshi was often sidelined into isolated translation scenes or given introverted subplots like Vanishing Point, where her character literally began fading out of existence. Park candidly noted in later interviews that she frequently wished for deeper, richer interpersonal relationships with her crewmates outside of strictly professional duties. Yet, when given the narrative freedom to unleash her full acting range, Park delivered unforgettable work. Most notably, in Season 4's acclaimed 2-part mirror universe storyline, In a Mirror, Darkly, Park stepped away from Hoshi's quiet demeanor to play a ruthless, calculating version of the character. Manipulating key figures and poisoning her rivals, Mirror Hoshi seized control of an advanced future starship and declared herself Empress of the Terran Empire, a ferocious, iconic performance that remains a high point of the entire series. The show also featured an impressive roster of female guest stars who enriched the nascent universe's political landscape. Legendary actress Fionnuala Flanagan made a lasting impact as Vulcan Ambassador Valar, bringing immense gravitas to scenes exploring early Vulcan diplomacy, while recurring appearances by Suzie Plakson and various Orion matriarchs added distinct grit to the galaxy's emerging power dynamics. Though Enterprise was unceremoniously cancelled in 2005 after just 4 seasons, right as late showrunner Manny Coto had rejuvenated the narrative in Season 4 with deeply researched, multi-episode lore arcs, the ultimate verdict on the series was far from settled. In the 2 decades following its cancellation, the broader critical assessment and cultural legacy of Enterprise have undergone a remarkable overdue reevaluation. The rise of global streaming platforms like Netflix and Paramount Plus provided Enterprise with a massive, vibrant second life. Unburdened by the aggressive early 2000 UPN network marketing, changing time slots, or hyperbolic online forum flame wars, an entirely new generation of viewers discovered the series on its own merits. Modern audiences and retrospective critics now view Enterprise not as a flawed failure, but as a bold, ahead-of-its-time prequel that dared to depict humanity at its most fragile, impulsive, and unpolished stage. The ambitious year-long Shindy storyline in Season 3 is now celebrated as one of the most daring serialized risks in television history, morality and desperation long before serialization became the industry standard. Season 4's meticulous world-building, explaining the origins of the Federation, the Vulcan Reformation, and the early Romulan threat, is now recognized by franchise historians as foundational storytelling that paved the way for modern shows like Star Trek, Strange New Worlds. What was once dismissed by impatient studio suits in 2005 as a faltering property has stood the test of time. The enduring power of Enterprise lies in its authenticity, a crew of flawed pioneers reaching into the dark, guided by a fierce Vulcan first officer who taught them what it truly meant to reach for the stars. In the end, Jolene Blalock didn't get lost in Hollywood. She just built a real life outside of it. Blalock took on one of the most demanding roles in sci-fi history, defined a generation of Star Trek, and then proved that true success means living life entirely on your own terms. Whether she ever steps onto a starship bridge again or continues building her legacy behind the scenes, her impact on pop culture remains undeniable. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite sci-fi icons. Thanks for watching.